So I think that this video is really important because it never occurred to me that there was a portion of the world that doesn't understand why people might not go to police when things happen like abuse or rape. It never occurred to me that there's some of you who wonder that. I guess I sort of feel like, where have you been in a lot of ways? Like, do you not have the internet? Do you not know other people who maybe don't have the same, I don't know, privileges that you somehow have managed to have in this world? I feel like you sort of beat the system if you don't get it, in a lot of ways. Or like you're just living a totally different life than I ever have. So I left home when I was really young, a teenager, and I first moved in. Well, it really starts earlier than that. There was police involved in my home life too when I was young, but I won't get too in depth on that situation. And after that, and of course that has effects as well. And after that, I lived with a cop's daughter who, she had a lot of parties, and evidently quite a few of the officers in that town really wanted to arrest her. But instead, everybody who showed up would get arrested. And, you know, lots of people I went to high school with, like, they'd all get arrested or get a summons for court, and she'd always get nothing. And then one weekend that I was at work, I worked midnight to 8 in the morning at Denny's when I was a teenager. And she got arrested, and she was put in jail for the entire weekend. Because they finally happened to catch her on a shift that her dad wasn't around or something. So they were always trying to target people around her. So I didn't have a license, but I did have a job. And I was driving home from Shaw's, where I was bagging groceries. I hated that job. It was very short-lived. I was really young. I think I was like 16 or something, or... Yeah, I'd worked at a salon first, and then this was my next one. I worked at a salon for a few years in Union called Studio 4, where I wore my stilettos on a regular basis. My 6-inch clear bottom stilettos, in which you call a different kind of shoe, but to me, I was 14 and they were pretty shoes. So, let's see. I got pulled over, and the officer said, "I know you don't have a license." And then I got arrested and got a ticket for driving without a license. And I received a letter in the mail that said my license was suspended for 30 days, even though I didn't have a license yet. So that was a little bit strange to me when I was a teenager. I was like, but I don't have a license, so how can it be suspended for 30 days? But somehow that's what happened. So anyway, fast forward to a little bit of the future. And I'm working at Denny's still. And there is an officer who works in the town over who comes in regularly and asks me on a date. And I was like, oh, I have a boyfriend. And I did at the time. He was in jail. He was in jail. But anyway, I did have a boyfriend. And I said, I have a boyfriend. I don't want to go on a date with you. And he said, if you don't go on a date with me, I'm going to pull you over because I know you don't have a license. So then I used to have people help me drive my car to the town line so that I could then drive home because I had a job and no license. And that was the only way that I could go to school too, which is why I needed to drop out of high school because I lived in Rockland, but I went to school in Waldoboro, Madomic Valley. Now, then I'm homeless at one point, living out of my car, lack of support from people who were supposed to be available to me. Supposed to is like a loose term, but also just maybe being autistic, but mostly lack of support from the people who should have been there for me. Let's see. I go to join the Navy, and I'm sitting down with the recruiter, and I had already weighed, like, okay, I might get raped, because I'd heard about that before, which means it's going to get covered up. Like, I knew that was a possibility, but I was like, okay, at that point, you could go to school for free and do anything you wanted. So I was like, I'll serve my time, I'll do the 4 years, and then I'll be able to go to school for whatever I want, which was like the icing on the cake for me. And also I needed a place to live. So this was like, okay, I've been yelled at my whole life. Like, I'm going to be able to handle this, and I'm tough, you know, I'm wicked strong. So I knew I could handle boot camp and agility and everything like that. I had no clue that there was astrophysics, but I do believe that had I joined that day, I would have become an astrophysicist, because in high school I didn't take any chemistry or any physics classes or anything like that, but I fell in love with quantum physics when I learned about it in January of 2014. And I also have a really, I'm pretty passionate about the stars ever since I was really young. I've been really interested in them. And then, of course, studied astrology starting at like a teenager, 19 years old, 17 really, but like 19 heavily. So basically, I go in and I try to sign up for the Navy, and this man, I was like, you have a warrant out for your arrest. And I was like, for what? I'm like genuinely shocked. Why on earth do I have a warrant out? And I go through all the things. I'm like, license, driving with a license, what's going on? So I have to go turn myself in. So I drove myself to the Rockland court system. And I said, hi, I'm here to turn myself in for a warrant. And they were like, we'll call the police and have them come get you. So they drove over, picked me up. He was really nice to me, actually. He's like, yeah, you can sit in the passenger seat beside me. Like, you don't seem very threatening. And I was like, okay, thanks. I'm like, I don't know what this is for, you know? So come to find out, her dad had not just gotten her out of the party, but he decided to put my name on the ticket for it, right? So when I found that out, I was like, wow, that is super messed up, right? So I ended up having to go to court, and I first met with the DA, and it was a lady. Maybe she was the assistant DA. She used to go out to Gilbert's. I saw her there regularly at one point. I don't know if she's still a DA or not, but I met with her in the office, and I had my boss at Denny's, my manager, print out a ticket for like right around the time of the party that she got in trouble for. My landlord signed a letter saying that I wasn't on the lease because I was underage, so you can't have providing a place for minors to consume when you're a minor yourself and you're not on a lease. So that was one of the things too that I had the landlord write. And the landlord added without me asking that my roommate, ex-roommate, cop's daughter was the one throwing the parties because they were aware of it. So she added that, which I was really grateful for, because I didn't ask for that. I just was looking at the legal aspect of things, because I pay attention. So even though I didn't go to school, I pay attention every time people speak to me about things, and I have a great memory. So that ended up being what I met her with, and she was pretty rude, actually. And I was like, listen, I didn't have this party. I was at work. Here are the tickets. Here's a letter from my manager, and here's a letter from the landlord. Like, all of this. And she very sassily was like, well, I'll see you in court, and gave me a court date, in which I showed up, and it was all thrown out. No surprise there. Then fast forward to my future, and I got some speeding tickets. So I finally go for my license when I'm 18, because that's when I had to wait until, because I wasn't emancipated, and you need a parent to sign for your license. So I failed the first time because I didn't pause long enough for railroad tracks, which I was really annoyed with, because, I mean, come on. There was no train coming, obviously. So, and I'd been driving for years at this point. I was a really good defensive driver. Really, really good. I had to be because I didn't want to get arrested again for driving a car without a license. But what was I supposed to do in Midcoast, Maine as a teenager who needed to have a job and a place to live? And actually, I lived out of my car for a good portion of it too. I used to get made fun of by the rich Camden boys who used to yell that I was the gypsy while I was like swimming at the lake and reading my astrology books and living out of my car. It never fazed me because to me, I was like, whatever, like I'm swimming in a lake and happy, and you're yelling at a teenager from a boat that's probably your dad's. So, whatever, people. So anyway, after that, I go for the second time. So I finally get my license when I'm 19. Because I had to wait a certain amount of period before I could get it. I was so nervous. And then I finally got my license. And then I got 2 speeding tickets going 81 and a 65 within a year of each other. So that meant that my license got suspended for 15 days for loss of points. So on a very traumatic evening for me, I got pulled over for a taillight being out. and I didn't have a license because my license had been suspended for 15 days for loss of points, and I didn't know it. And the suspension time had already been over, but I didn't pay that $35 to reinstate my license. So I got arrested, brought to the jail. Then my license got suspended for 60 days because it had already been suspended for that 30 days, even though I didn't yet have a license as a teenager. I have no idea how that happened in the system, none at all. But then it got suspended for 60 days. And when I was trying to leave my ex-husband 13 days before my license got reinstated, he worked 5 minutes away, and I had stashed money for my job, and I was going to leave him because he was a horrible husband. I know he was used as an example on the stand as a good man for my ex-abuser to get away with crippling me, but I will say he was not a good husband to me. Maybe he's changed, maybe he's grown up, and maybe he's gotten rid of his problems that he had back then, but he was not a good person to me, and if he's being honest, he would say that. So expectations of men are very low these days for me. So I don't expect any honesty from anyone, but he knows what he did. They all do. So then I got pulled over for a headlight being out. And he was actually super nice. He wanted to just tell me that my headlight was out. And I was like, I don't have a license. I don't have a license. And he interacted with me the kindest out of them all. I was so stressed. I didn't know what was going to happen. And then I lost my license for 3 years from that. So I was able to get a work permit after 1.5 years. Fast forward to time, an officer asked me when I got out of my car and was walking past his car if that was my car. Yeah. Is your name this? Yeah. And he said, well, you don't have a license. And I was like, yes, I do. Because my insurance, I had to file an SR-22, even though, as you can hear in this story, none of these had to do with drugs or alcohol, or even the speeding tickets did play in, but not to the times that I got pulled over for driving without a license. It was headlight, tail light. One guy knew I didn't have a license. And then this is what happened this time too. And it turned out that my insurance had not made it to the payment place in time. So there was a time period where my license was suspended because I needed the SR-22, even though, again, this never had anything to do with drinking and drugs, or even speeding or running a stoplight or a red light. And I was like, oh my God, please do not give me this ticket. I have worked so hard. You have no idea what my life has been like. And I tried to reason with him like a person, but he didn't want to hear it. And I ended up going to jail for 30 days. And they illegally strip searched me. So that means I had to go into a side room and squat and cough naked while somebody stared at my asshole. And evidently that was illegal, and they had a tendency to do this. I don't know why anybody would want to stare at people's assholes if they didn't have to while they were naked and squatting and coughing, but evidently this jail had a tendency to do that. And I did not sue them, even though, or I guess at that point it had already been a Class C lawsuit. So all I had to do is write to the lawyers that had already won the suit, and then they would have sent me $5,000. And it's funny, I didn't have any money when I got out of jail because I lost my jobs too. And I went in a day before Thanksgiving. I went to jail. So basically, my cat died the morning I got out of jail. And the night before, my boyfriend at the time tried to call me and ask me what vet I went to because my cat was dying. And the guards did not give me the message, even though I was getting out the next day. And they said, well, sometimes people just do things like that. I was like, my cat died. My cat died. I literally went home. My cat died at 4 a.m. and I got out of jail at 10 or something. So my cat died before I got out of jail. The cat that my ex hit in the head with a mag light when he was only a few weeks old. And he was a tiny little kitten when I've had him since he was born. I used to do laundry with him in my collarbone. And the guard, when I checked out of jail, first of all, I drove myself to the wrong jail too. This is my life. My lawyer, who I paid for, who told me in the beginning it was a clear case of entrapment and it was no problem. We were going to win. And then he didn't contact me for like until we went to court the day before. And he said, yeah, you're going to go to jail for like a month. And I was like, what happened to entrapment? So I'm not really sure exactly what happened there. Actually, I am, but I'm not going to speak on it. People know what they've done. So anyway, I ended up driving myself to the wrong jail all the way up in Wiscasset, right? And I had just enough gas to get there, smoked my last cigarette. Yes, tobacco's bad. Don't smoke, kids. It's bad for you. But I smoked when I was young and I did enjoy it, but I don't do it now. Anyway, so I started to get checked into jail. I'm not sure what it's called. And the woman's telling me about the yoga program that they have. And I'm like, damn, this sort of sounds like vacation. Like, are you crazy? Like, there's a yoga program? This is great. I do yoga all the time. I do it 3 times a day. And then she's like, oh, honey, you're not supposed to be here. You've got to go down to Rockland. And I was like, damn. So I checked myself into the wrong jail. So I had to call my childhood neighbor because she was the person that ran the jail. I don't know what the name is. And I was like, hey, I'm late to jail because I went to the wrong one. I'm not trying to skip out on it or anything. I just got to drive myself there. Isn't that funny? Because I had a license like the next day. So it's funny that I literally drove myself to jail so that I could be in jail for 30 days for driving a car without a license, right? It's not that funny. This totally ruined my life. As you can imagine, in a small area, going to jail is not so good for you. So I ended up bumming a cigarette from the gas station people because I was like, I'm late to jail. Do you have a cigarette? And then I drove to jail, and then I got there and they said visiting hours are not right now. And I was like, what are you talking about? They thought I was a lawyer there to visit a client. And I was like, no, I'm here to check myself in. They had to tell me not to smile when they took the picture. That's true. And right before I left, when I was really upset, really upset. And I taught the girls yoga because I had taken yoga by a great teacher who allowed me to, she was such a good teacher because she gave us the same sequence so I could do it on my own time. And then if I couldn't afford to go to her class, I knew what to do. That's what you're supposed to do when you're a yoga teacher. It's good for people to know how to do what you do with them in class. It's the point. And he yelled at us, a guard yelled at us for being in cobra pose because evidently we were not allowed to lay our stomachs on the ground. I was so mad at him. I must have given him my native glare. I'm pretty sure he died of a heart attack, actually, shortly after. But anyway, I didn't wish that upon him or anything. It's just a random fact. So basically, after that, he said, see you soon, the guard that knew that my cat died that morning. That was how he interacted with me. Now, I was 24. There was a lot of girls in this jail that were young, that had been stuck in the system for a long time. It was sad. One girl was an incredible artist. She just didn't know how to highlight and shade yet, so I taught her. I hope she's out of jail. I hope she's with her kids. There was another woman in there who also kind of like stuck in the system just because they decided to trap her. She came to one of my music shows afterwards when I sang in a cover band. And I was so happy to see her out of jail and just happy to see her because she's a really good person too, who just got stuck in the wrong system. It was really enlightening for me to see, to be honest. And I just sort of observed everything because that's what I do. And I listened to what every one of them had to say. And actually, what made me really happy about it is later I worked with a photographer, which all of the discs from us working together, it was only a handful of times, but we got like 20,000 pictures because he just said go and I would dance and move and he got all these great pictures. But people have stolen those discs. So if you do see any of those pictures online, please feel free to let me know because it must be my ex-abuser, and he was literally ordered by a judge not to do anything with photos of me. So that would be illegal and a huge violation. If you see them anywhere, please let me know immediately. So let's see. I got out, but before I went in, there's one more thing too. Before I went to jail, there were people around my apartment at night with flashlights and lights, and people that used to go hang out because it was like a storage unit, and my apartment wasn't the storage unit, but it was in a storage unit building. And then my apartment was in the front, and there were two other apartments there. And there was people around a lot. And I was alone with my dog, and yes, I had neighbors, but I ended up going into the police station, and I was like, listen, I need to tell you this. These few things have happened, and I'm just asking if every so often you can drive a car down in. And the officer will know who he is. And he literally he made fun of me for it. He made fun of me and acted like it was a joke. So, yeah, it's not exactly like you feel so comfortable with police, especially if you don't know them at all, and that's how you've been treated, and that's what's happened. At one point, I did think about becoming a cop because I thought that I would be helpful for the girls that were in jail, like things like that, to be like, no, this is not happening anymore. But I also realized I would be too nice, and like if people were speeding, I don't think I could give them a ticket because I sped a lot. I mean, like, why are you going so fast? Because it's really fun. I mean, no reason. Like, what are you supposed to say? The music was fast. I was singing. I'm a really good driver, and it's really fun. I mean, my dream was to be able to drive like a really awesome, like my 67 Stingray that I don't own one, but you know, my dream or whatever. And to drive it on a winding road as fast as I could. Someday I was going to save enough money to pay someone to be able to do that. And now I won't be able to, because not only do I not know how to drive a standard, I've tried a few times like on a side road and then in a parking lot one time, but I'm not a standard driver. But now with this incomplete spinal cord injury, forget about it. It's never going to happen. But anyway, yeah, so that pretty much sums up my interactions with police all before I was 24. This is not uncommon. This is actually more common than not. The people or the women that have been surprised, you are the minimum here. You are the ones who are actually the lower percentage in this regard. There are many of us who are aware of how this works. And if it hasn't worked that way for you, I don't know, maybe you used your womanly wiles, or you seemed innocent enough, or maybe you were perfect. I'm not really sure. I was really prideful. I never tried to get my way out of a ticket. I was always honest because I was told to be honest. One of the times I got pulled over in New York, thank God that officer was trained really well, because I had my insurance card in my Paul Mitchell bag because I worked at a salon when I was young. And so I had that, my insurance card's in there. So I got pulled over. I thought he was a tow truck because he had orange lights. And then I noticed his big hat, and I was like, oh my God, I'm getting pulled over. And as I reached over to get my insurance card, when I came up from grabbing it, he had his hand on his gun. And I was like, oh my God. And I must have looked so scared because, you know, you cop with a gun and all of that. But I do have to say to this man, he probably doesn't remember me. And I had a fat face back then because I lost, I got older. So my collagen from my youthful face is gone, or what I call my fat face. Now you can see my cheekbones that were always there, but I had a fat face, so you couldn't tell. But I just gotta say, who was really more dangerous? Me going 81 in a 65, or you whipping onto the highway to catch me when you were going way faster in a 25 mile per hour zone on that ramp to get to me? I just gotta say, who's giving you the ticket? Who's higher than the statey? Because you were the one that was endangering people. You blasted onto the highway going crazy. You must have been going 100 to catch up to me. I was only going 81. That was slow for me. And everybody else was going like 100. So I just have to add that. Now, if you fast forward to time, there's other situations that kind of played into this, but that pretty much sums up. I actually felt a little more comfortable with police as I got a little bit older, because a few of them used to come into the bar that I worked at, and they were usually pretty nice to me. One of them I had known since I was a kid, so I was really comfortable with. And then the other few were kind of like, they were kind people. But I still, like one time, one of them jokingly pulled me over on my way home from work, and like I still had a heart attack. Every time a statey is going to come up behind me, I'm going to have a heart attack. Like, it's not enjoyable for me because there's too many moments that happened in my past to make it exciting or enjoyable. So you ask things like, why don't people go to the police? And I hope this whole 25 minutes that you could manage to get through, if you've made it this far, can help you understand a little bit about what can happen. And what I've experienced is minor compared to a lot of people too. If you just Google things, you could find out too a lot of things that women go through. And again, once you're in the system, it's usually really hard to get out because people will target you, especially, well, that's a whole other video. But there you go. That's why women don't always go to the police right away, or people. That's why you don't always trust the police. Those of you that automatically think you can trust them are just different. You know, you're different.